Hey. Hmm. The game we've been working on for a couple of months. It's down at the bottom. It's called Small Towers. And chat can play this game. The bots are playing it now, but they will happily get out of the way and stop demoing the game if you queue up. So, I'll leave the description of the command in chat. But I thought I'd describe what the most recent stuff is going on. We've been making this game, and it kind of looks like a game. So there's a weird thing about this. If you start with an idea for a game, there's no game. Sounds obvious, but think about it. Then you start to build pieces of it, but the rest of the game still isn't there. It's in a very different state than just the idea with no game, and a very different state from this, where there's basically a complete game. This middle ground is hard to describe to people. It's hard to describe what game design and game development in general looks like, let alone what a designer's role is in making the game. It's very difficult to describe because what are you working on? Is it art? Are you making code? It's like, well, actually design is neither of those things, but we have to work with them. And in fact, without the pieces of the game, we can't really move very far in the design process at all. We have to put something down, test it out, get feedback, and revise our designs and make it better. Making things better is an excellent definition. When someone asks, what is design? You can say it. It's making things better. That's what it is. Well, if you have followed this project, it's only been a couple of months. It's a little easier to do than our other game project, Shuffle Wars. We'll go back to that soon because this is done. If you've been following this, you've seen the building of the pieces, the making of some of the art, and some of the code needed to make this work. So in Unity, we have a project that makes this game appear the way it does, play the way it does. So I can show you this. I mean, there's only one scene in this entire game. It's just one scene. It's the scene. And I have organized it like folders, even though it's really just game objects with a special tool that locks it in place. But whether it's the folders in the project or the, quote, folders in scene, you're seeing organization first, right? And you're seeing a lot of stuff. Granted, it might be a little bit overwhelming. But you'll recognize that there is art in the game and there's a folder for art. The textures are the images I bring in. Materials are just the things that need to show the images, but they're also give me a platform to do fancier stuff, especially with our shaders. Right? The archer, for example, needs to have two pieces one can rotate. Well, this organization is part of the design process. Now, did I have all of this organization thought out at the beginning of the process? No. what I had thought out at the beginning of the process, frankly, looked like the end product. It looked more like the end game, right? And the way that I thought about it at that time was more or less what you see at the bottom of the screen. So to go from that concept to this organization is a big part of the design process. And it's not obvious to people how a game concept goes from there to here. It's not obvious looking at a finished game that it even has this step, that it even has this kind of complexity behind the scenes. But when you begin to develop a game, you realize, oh wow, there are actually a lot of details. The fact that I need to pause between things that I display for the player means that there needs to be a bit of a timer, and that time is tuned to to be enough time for a player to read the words and then they can move on. Like, that's just one of hundreds of decisions that needed to be found, noodled, decided on, tested, revised, right? And that's the design process. So here we are towards the end, and I can talk about one of the coolest parts of the process for a designer, and that's now that there are lots of pieces in place, now that the game is basically built and put together and running, now before we finish, we can take the pieces that are there and tune it. To tune the game, to polish the game, to tune the game is to go back through and say, great, everything's working. Hopefully bugs are fixed and things are working great. Now, what could we do to make it better? In a very real way, games like Valorant have a tuning process that continues to run on and on because it's a live service game and they do updates. They not only release new characters and maps and skins and things, but they will make tweaks to the metrics and numbers for small details in the game systems. To say Cypher was nerfed and his the cooldown for using his ability, that this ability has been changed from 0.8 seconds to 0.9 seconds. That's an example of tuning. In our game, we could say these characters that we've been seeing at the bottom of the screen, they have hit points, they do damage, they move at a certain rate. Those are metrics or numbers that we can tune. And not that we want to go in and change things for the sake of changing them, but especially after we can see everything together and after we've seen the game running for a while like we have, well, now we can go into and revisit the pieces of these characters, for example, that might be tuned. Here's what I threw in most recently. This script handles combat for characters. And clearly hit points is part of that. Defense, meaning the Marauder has a shield, but other characters like the healer also have some defense points. While they are not moving and they're facing the opponent and they take damage, the defense actually reduces the amount of damage they take. That's what it's there for. If they are moving, they're facing away or something, they take full damage. Well, having made these characters is one of the first things in the process, and then having developed them one at a time before I moved on to other parts of the game, I had not seen these metrics for a while. We've worked on it for 2 months, but still, that's quite a while before I came back and realized what these metrics were for, say, the Marauder. This prefab shows what happens when Marauder is spawned like that. And the Marauder has some hit points. I knew this value and was working off of that and could see it working in the game. This attack range is how far he decides he should be attacking. And then I looked at this and said, wait a minute, he doesn't have any defense points? And I remembered at that moment that defense was a thing that I added later. I think I had moved on and was working on the healer when I realized I wanted some similarities between a healer and a marauder. They are both able to out to the front of the battle and be in the fray. The healer's supposed to heal out in front. And so I gave the healer some defense. All the while, we've been testing and testing and testing. The Marauder has never had defense. And I thought he did. I mean, he visibly has a shield, but that doesn't matter if there's no hit points being taken away. By the same token, I looked at the other metrics. The maximum number of damage is 5 for the Marauder. I looked at this, maximum number of damage for the healers, 3. Seems a little low. I looked at these and immediately there's an opportunity to tune these numbers. Again, not to do it for the sake of changing them, but doing them in light of what we've been seeing since we've been playtesting this game and since it has been coming together. Since we've had all 5 characters, we've been seeing the various interactions between them. We've seen the bots play countless games, frankly, and it's clearer now to see how they could be tuned. So I went ahead and made constant variables. That's not an oxymoron. It means that it's meant to be a named value. The name is helpful because you can just use human readable language to describe what the value actually means. And more importantly, it can be reserved, like up here with my other variable declarations, to be a space meant for tuning variables. These values are meant to be tuned. The maximum hit points for the Marauder, we saw that. The maximum attack value they had, it was 5. The maximum defense, the defense points for this Marauder, it was 0. So I saw these original values and said, whoa. Well, I saved them. You can see them in comments here. And this now is the value that you see running at the bottom. Marauders have the same hit points. They attack with more, with a higher top end. It's still 1 to 7, but it's not 1 to 5. They can do more damage. They also have, by default, a defensive rating of 3. This means 3 hit points are being taken away from the damage being dealt to them. That said, any hit on a character does at least 1 damage, regardless of defense. So this, now you can see, you may have noticed, if you've looked at the game at the bottom, arrows are no longer doing as much damage. They're largely doing, especially to Marauders, 1 or 2 damage. This is because the archer is doing 1 to 3 like he normally does, but especially Marauders have defense now, and they didn't before. So here I am tweaking these numbers for each of the characters. And you'll notice, first of all, I am still using prime numbers, but also The archer I left alone, right? I left the wizard alone too, but remember how the archer was totally overpowered? It was a dominant strategy to get a gang of archers and roll through. Well, that's still true, but now this is effectively nerfing the archer because the other characters have things that they should. The engineer has a higher attack rating. He does more damage, just a little bit more. He's still pretty weak. But also the healer has been bumped up. So he really is supposed to be out front, and he's a little more effective. This isn't actually nerfing the archer, but I am balancing it. This is tuning, and it does take more testing to determine how well it works. But I've been doing that. And this is, as I say, something you can't do till the end. You can't really do it until you've had both time to look at what was there, but also, and to consider what needs to be done, like, hey, the archers are strong, but also all of the pieces are in place. Then you can tune. And it is a best practice to reserve values like this as constant variables, putting them at the top and labeling them in such a way that it's easy to say, adjust these values here, right? Because they're all grouped here, they're all ready to be tuned, and they're meant for tuning. This, as opposed to putting these literal values straight in the code down here. Now, that said, I do that on occasion. I guess I could try and find one. It does happen. But you try not to, and it's precisely for this reason. You do want access to important values. You also want to name them, both so the code is human readable, but also so that the grouped tunable values are, you can tell the intention of the value. You know the meaning of the value by the name. This is part of polish and part of what we do at the end of the process. And so let's point out a couple other pieces of the polish that we've been doing. We added upgrades. Upgrades, it took a while to decide exactly what the upgrade system needed to be, but as our just chatting stream showed, we landed on imposing the least amount on new players by making it visually obvious and trying to avoid taking away promises that we give a first-time player. For example, the wizard. We tell you about spells, but then you can't have all those spells right off the bat. You need to be upgraded. There is a time when we have to tell the player, you can't have that spell. But that's the only time. The rest, of it is simply adding to what the characters the buildings you had can do. So as part of that, we needed to update our help screen to include upgrade, and to indicate that it cost 11. We did, we standardized this just to make upgrades simple to understand. There were different costs for different upgrades. It would be confusing. If there were different rules we needed to explain to tell you what upgrades did, it would be too much. The most we went is we divided spells between spells and advanced spells. That's it. This is also going to correlate with, you trying to do a spell on a wizard that hasn't been upgraded. It will tell you wizard needs to be upgraded before they can cast these 2 advanced spells. So we had to revise this as well, and this is polished as well. We went through a process to make this panel readable, referable. You can call it up with the command SMOL help, and it can stay there for, 10 minutes or something, and it will go away at the end of the match. But a new player can get the help they need. They can refer to this cheat sheet throughout the entire battle. They can take it away if they don't want it, but they can call it up for the next match if they want. So they get an example command, they get explanations about the different commands, and the full list of commands is sitting here in a static way, so they can match the image to the cost to the command and put it all together. The game is not complicated. This still had a lot of stuff to throw at the player, at a new player. So it took a while to compose this, and we revised it to include upgrade. And I think this is an example of making things better. This panel originally was totally different, and we revised it several times to get it to this state. It meets several different needs that we discovered along the way that required new changes. So that's a better example of the process. So here we are. I would hesitate to say this could not still be improved, right? Part of the process assumes improvement. Improvement can always happen. And what would prompt the next round of improvements would be a player jumping into the game and giving us feedback about a thing. That's prompted a lot of changes that you can see going on right now. This little +1, for example, came from a user who didn't realize that this is actually the total gold that you get when a new coin appears. That each coin is actually representing +1. There's other rules and details we may discover. Perhaps a player really, they discover that you can upgrade the tree, and we're not explicitly telling you you can upgrade the tree or the flag or the mine. Well, maybe once they find out, they say, oh, this is a crime. You really should tell us that immediately. Go back and figure out how to say that, right? It could be they say, I can just win these games easy by just throwing as many marauders as I can at the enemy and call it done. Maybe that's true. Maybe that bears out, We see something in feedback from the player, whether it's something that doesn't meet their expectations or something that they discovered that the bots aren't showing us. Cool. That feedback helps us make the game better for players. And so we revise it. I can't say that we wouldn't revise it any further. I can say it's ready for a lot of player testing. So over the holidays, we'll just have this game running. Likely going back to Shuffle Wars, but I think before then what we'll probably do is play more variety games. Little Bioshock, little Half-Life 2, and probably Valorant from time to time. And what we'll ask is that players give us that feedback. And the best way to do that in a proper playtesting fashion is to ask them to think out loud. If they're in a voice channel, I'll do exactly that and say, if you don't mind, think out loud and tell me what you're thinking moment to moment so that I can hear when you've discovered something for the first time, when you assume something that I never thought of. I can hear it. And then, of course, at the end, we thank them, but then we want them to give us their summary and what they would take away from this, what they remember about it, what they would tell others about it. These are good tactics in a playtesting session to elicit the kind of information you need, the kind of information we don't get while we're making this game. The kind of information that we deal with while we're making the game is a bunch of details, from organizing stuff to making the art to writing the code. And it's too easy to go from the original concept to those details in organization and to skip a whole bunch of stuff that a new player sees naturally. There's no substitute for bringing in humans to interface with your game and tell you all the stuff that you didn't even think of. Now, they may have ideas about your game, things you could add or something cool. And the best way to take those is not to necessarily treat them as tasks to do, but to understand where that idea came from. What expectation made them feel that that was something that should be there, right? In other words, it may give you further insight to make a better improvement, regardless of the specific thing that they mention, right? There's a delicate way that you interpret user feedback. So at the end of the process, we do lots of testing, we do polish, and we try to refine as much as possible. So I can't say we won't continue to play test and find improvements that we could make. But at this time, I'm kind of running out of things to do on it. Plus, it's been long enough. I think we're pretty good. This is probably 1 or 2 steps away from actually being released. If I were to release it, but frankly, it's, the steps would include decoupling me and this particular Twitch channel from the code so that another Twitch user could stream with this game and they could be the administrator. It could read their chat and it could be used on their channel. There's a couple of steps in there I've already taken just to see what that would be. It is an interesting thought, but there's also the idea that, there are more costs involved than just putting it on a marketplace or something to call it ready for someone to give you money and, to sell it. It actually is going to cost a fair amount of time and money to put it at that state, as well as, if I put it on anything like Steam, there's a pretty lengthy, rigorous process to vet the system, and I bet there would be more time involved than I am realizing at this time. I've heard about that process. Not that it's bad at all. It's just not what I set out to do when I set on this hobby project. It is, in fact, a hobby project. So, I've been sitting here playing this game here in the editor because, as you probably noticed, there's an error that I made that says I'm not connecting to Twitch. So I've been doing that because I've specifically made it so the game is ignoring the fact that it's broken. It's not actually connected to Twitch. I'm just having the bots play. This is an example of me putting the game in a state that is ready to be tested here locally. And It's an example of deeper testing you do in the process before you finish the game to ensure comprehensive reliability. This software, you are making software. This process of making software includes potentially testing where testing specific conditions, maybe edge cases, and you may need to set things up a particular way. I've often gone in and grabbed a couple of characters to, throw in the scene so that I can play and test a particular thing. That happens often. And this would be an example of, a very simple example of setting up your test. But a more involved example is actually changing your code or even writing new code just to do the test. This is, as an example, where cheat codes come from. The reason there are cheat codes in games is because the developers at one time or another needed to cheat to test the software. Rather than playing the game to get to the boss and test the boss, they would teleport or cheat or God mode their way to the boss, and then they would ungod mode and test. For example, that's where cheat codes come from. And it's a common practice to write code to help you test the system as it's intended for the player by making situations that, by artificially creating the edge cases you're trying to test. Well, I think that's about all I need to talk about in terms of software development for this project. The things that this upgrade manager does, as you see the bots or players upgrade a character, for example, all the characters of that type will flash. This is able to take multiple upgrade calls at once and store them and play them out. I had to do the same thing with spells. There was a problem that wizards, there might be two wizards and they're casting spells at the same time, but the spell managers could only handle one at a time. So same thing, I handle an array of spells that need to be managed. So now, actually, yeah, you could call Dragon Strike several times and there'll be 3 dragons flying in the air or something. And so this upgrade manager does the same thing, just in case there's an edge case that there are multiple upgrades happening simultaneously. And when they are run, not only do they flash, but they actually call up the changes to the character. Some characters only need to know what their upgrade level is. Other characters actually have changes, like their stats. Same with buildings. Buildings upgraded from the mine to the flag to the tree. Some things only need to know what their upgrade level is and they can do the rest. Other things, like the barricade, actually need to have like the red barrel planted on it so it will explode when destroyed. And so they call up the set upgrade level function, which I've just modified from something that was already there. In the case of a character, when I call this and give it the level that it's being upgraded to, it is resetting hit points. So here, this is actually what's happening when characters are upgraded. Those original stats, here they are. This is the tunable variables we were looking at the beginning of this VOD. And literally, I just add the upgrade level. It's rather straightforward. For other upgrades, I do something a little more complicated, but basically, I need to use both whatever I've tuned this to be and a integer upgrade level. It starts at 0 and goes up 1, 2, 3. I do note, for example, that the archer detects that its upgrade level is not 0, and so they now shoot flaming arrows. They just turn on flaming arrow on each arrow they spawn. And the same thing happens with the buildings that are upgraded. There's a function for that, and depending on what they're doing, they have a variety of changes they make. You know what? It is more involved. Let's look at it. Here it is. So, like I said, if you only need to know the upgrade level, you're done. But if I'm going to add hit points, for example, to the flag, and it might be damaged, I do a little calculation to make sure I keep that damage while I increase how many hit points overall the flag has. The barricade needs to spawn a barrel, etc. And keep in mind, the barricade and the tower are built. So it's interesting that, the flag has a hit point maximum and stuff at the start. But at the start, these actually have a hit points that grow as it's built. Starts at 0. And so I use these tunable values during the build process as well. Each stage they're building is increasing their hit points so that a partially built barricade is actually much easier to knock down. And is that process right here? No, building power. Well, anyway, there's a lot of code in this project. You can see if you look at the scroll wheel, I mean, I'm looking at one script just for buildings. And, like characters, there's actually a lot to buildings. They have different powers and do different things. So there's a lot of code, but that's just one script in many. And that brings us back to the organization. In total, here's all the scripts that make up the tools for this game. From just the simple tool that makes folders possible out of game objects here, this tool, to the building and character managers, the game script itself, the player scripts. These are probably the biggest ones right here. But you can see I've divided the labor among all the different rules of the game and features of the game into these different scripts. Partially so that they are smaller, and partially because when something goes wrong, like with the animation, I know where to go. These are the scripts that are meant to go on game objects, so I call them tools. Because everything that's going to sit in the level, in the scene, is a tool. There are other scripts, along with my shaders. There are scripts that just have functions, like this random Gaussian function I use all the time to get random number that is weighted in the middle. I have these available for my tools, so my tools can be smaller. I've offloaded these functions here. Those are the functions. Here are the variables. My data scripts, likewise, are small, but it's a centralized place to, for example, hold all the game data. This is data of each match and how it's running. This is data for the settings for the game overall, like every match. So I know the starting gold in the match has a random range between this and this. You know, and these, frankly, are the things that I control with admin commands to control the game, not individual matches within the game. I used to think we were going to lock away characters, and I no longer think that. That was an upgrade idea for the tree, actually. And then there's game stats. Boy, look at all the stats. Tons of stats. This actually helps me tune the game because I can understand more of what's going on after the bots play for a while. I can look at the longest match time and realize, oh my gosh, these guys have been playing for 90 minutes. Although the average match time is less than 4 minutes, there's some games that just go on forever. What's going on? They haven't spawned many wizards. What's happening? You know, they haven't done any upgrades or something. I can see from the stats how to, for example, tune the AI, but I also nerd out on the data. Obviously, there's just one scene. I told you that, but then the prefabs are everything from UI elements and game tools specifically designed to run, for example, a player, one of the players, to the characters and the buildings. Whether it's called up because an engineer can build it or it's just sitting there, prefabs help make sure that it's consistent no matter how many copies I bring in. And it's just a best practice way of working. So I think I've exhausted what I could say about the project. It will stay running, and anyone who wants to come in and talk about it, I'm happy to. But this channel is about game design and how game design works in game development. And doing a smaller project like this is a much more comfortable way to do that than Shuffle Wars. Shuffle Wars is, frankly, an experiment in working a different way. This was, I see what I want to have happen with the game, therefore I know what kind of art it needs. And so I will start with the art that I am thinking of, and we'll move from there, you know. I can make the art, bring it into the project, and write some code for it, and begin to make it move or do combat, and build up the features in a way that I can see the next step, and I just take it. As the game begins to develop, I can then reserve things to tune and fix, but I can still get through. I can just push through lots of features as the original game design idea had. And frankly, I spent a fair amount of time without any computer stuff, just imagining what this simple battle, this one-dimensional tower defense game with 2 players, how that would play out. And this is the way that I've found to get the most playable value in the least amount of time. Shuffle Wars is working an entirely different way. Sometimes called finding the fun. And I have never put too much stock into it, but I needed to see for myself. That's what that is. It's an experiment. Shuffle Wars now is totally functional, but looks like nothing. And is totally confusing to any new player. And yeah, as opposed to this kind of game that I did for Small Towers, this is always playable. Shuffle Wars is completely unplayable, given, even though we've worked on it for about 8 months. So, riddle me that. Yeah, I've kind of come to the conclusion that I was right all along, that way of working is not efficient at all. But we can talk about that later. We'll do art for Shuffle Wars later, right? That's mainly what needs to be done. And UX design and art is what we need to do. But for this project, I think we're good. I would like to demonstrate what the stats look like. So I just showed you a big long list of variables, but when I say toggle stats as an admin command, it looks like this. So as the bots have been playing on the stream, this is what's been going on. And it's insights like this that I'm happy to have the computer record. And then when I look at it like this, I can really see through the numbers how things might be tuned better. And that definitely helped in this process. Okay. And might as well play one last game here, yeah? I mean, I'm happy to play. I'll just keep this up on my stream anytime I'm streaming. But notice, for example, there's the upgrade command in the intermission stuff. Just to help a new player understand that there is actually a new command called upgrade. I've also added this intermission language to tell you, oh no, we're not just sitting here and nothing happening. There's actually a reason why there's a pause before the bot queues up with you. The game is not starting now because we're actually waiting for another human to queue up with you. But if no human queues up, we will give you a bot. So, got a couple of marauders and an archer. Yeah, I do need more humans to test because I think I've gone as far as I can with this game without human feedback. But I've already seen things that a playtester brought up that I actually could never see. They said that there's a spam limitation on Twitch chat. It stops you from spamming chat. And it's like, oh, right, of course. But I don't have that limitation at all. I think it's because I own the channel, right? It's my channel, so of course I'm the administrator of the channel, that kind of a thing. But it does make sense. If they have a problem with that, that's going to be a major issue in terms of their being able to play the game. Now, it's fair to say, if both players have that limitation, then, that might be fair. Maybe. Maybe. I can imagine, the whole idea of allowing the recruit command or the build command to just take the first letter came out because somebody was trying to type it and couldn't because there's another Twitch chat spam thing that keeps you from typing the same command. I might be able to control that. In fact, I think it might need to be a command that I actually type into chat at the beginning of every stream. But, it did also prompt me to allow any variation of character names, building names, things like that, so that it could just happen. I'm going to do a smart thing and upgrade the mine. There's that flash. Upgrading the mine means it's going to give me gold a little faster. Just a little faster. But that puts me at a good advantage, especially if I do it early. So very subtle. It's like a 20% increase in the rate of gold. It's subtle. So the tuning we did, now you can see some marauders attacking and getting like 6, even 7 damage on an opponent. And that's new. When I do damage on this barricade, it's probably going to be around 7. I mean, it can be up to 7. Boom. Easy. Now, the bots aren't supposed to be masters at this. They're really just placeholder players, so humans have something to do. But I've seen them pull out some cool maneuvers just randomly, but they do. I mentioned recruiting a group of healers. Turns out they can heal each other, and they're pretty hard to beat. Same with a group of archers. I saw them do that. And that was one of the first clues that I needed to do something about the archer. Yeah, it'll be good for the holidays, having this game available at the bottom of the screen, not taking up too much space, like literally 10% of the bottom of the screen is where this game lives, for the most part. And yeah, I can play other games. So while I'm cruising around Rapture and Bioshock, I'll have this running. Oh, I'm unable to see clearly. Okay. So I'm going to sit by the tree, take advantage of the healing. They are very far from their tree, so I get to chew on their troops. Get to let them waste their resources while I heal. Okay. So I upgraded the mine before. It's a good strategy. And if there was just one dominant strategy that emerged that just rules them all, that would be a problem. It limits the effective choice for the player. They can choose anything else, but if it's just one dominant strategy, that's, there's no reason to, right? Instead, there are different things you can do, and different things you can do at different times in the match. This opening, I've made use of the tree, gotten enough gold and troops that I can do this attack now. I'm actually gonna, build a tower if I can. If I don't die. Stay alive, guys. Okay. Oh. Thought I had one. Cool. So another strategy might be to recruit a wizard. Again, to do this I have to save up a lot of gold, but... So with the mine I was able to get more full gold over time. With the wizard I could just steal it. Well, that didn't work out. Oops. So, this many forces in place. Now I have a healer. Let's get two. At some point, getting the flag is best done with the Marauder. You need them. It's getting through the defenses, it's managing the gold, it's avoiding the strategy that they have set up against you, like a bunch of archers or a wizard. When they've set that up against you, you have to approach them differently. For example, archers in towers are tough to beat unless you have archers as well, unless you move your marauders around and keep them from sitting still. So if you have to sit still to hit a barricade, for example, best to find a new way to get through there and get to the base of the tower. These emergent strategies players can find themselves because there's enough complexity in the game. So we'll continue to test. Learn more as we have humans play. I think the bots have kind of exhausted what they can tell us about the game. And yeah, it's ready to be tested. There's enough fun surprises for players who've just started playing or have been playing for a while that it should be a good thing to set up for players for the holidays, and so I'm excited to do that. Hey, the holidays are right around the corner. Don't forget. And what we'll do is, we'll set up variety games so that this game at the bottom of the screen doesn't distract. This works for Valorant, and I'm sure it's going to work for the other games as well. It's silent, so it doesn't intrude. And yeah, I think it'll be good. So, if you like watching a cartoon ape make games with free software, you can follow, like, subscribe, retweet. When you show up on stream, you could use Command Tie, which tells me you're here and I'll pay attention to you. Until then, have fun, do well, be good, stay safe. See ya.